Hi, ladies. This is a little different, but I wanted us to be able to meet and connect together. I know things are happening rather quickly, and we're all just trying to navigate through this. But I wanted us to feel some sense of normalcy. And some of you may still be working, and but the kids are out of school, and just so much has changed over these last couple of days, and not really sure what that's going to look like over the next couple of weeks as we move forward. So trying to, again, like I said, create some sense of normalcy. So today, for our Bible study, we'll be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 3. And I sent you the link to the lesson itself. And just want to talk about it a little bit. I'd like for you guys to listen to this, read through the lesson, and then we'll get together later on tonight via Zoom. I'll send you instructions on all that so that we can just talk through some of this and pray together. Last week, our beginning question was, what is your response? And remember, we were looking at Hannah at the end of chapter 1 when she had brought the baby to Eli. And then when she left, she was leaving her baby with Eli. And instead of the response of crying or going off and being depressed, which all of those things, in my opinion, would have been legitimate responses. But instead she began to pray. And her heart began to rejoice in the Lord. And then we see that what that showed us was she was able to look beyond any of those circumstantial things and see Christ. So she gave her baby to the Lord, and then she began to praise, and she prayed to God. So the question was, what would be our response? What would we do if we were having to sacrifice something that we dearly loved, had been wanting for so long, and then we feel like God had given it to us, and now we had to give it back? What would be our response? We saw in the very opening lines of chapter 2, it says, and then. So as soon as this happens, leaving her baby, then she began to praise God. We saw her heart rejoiced. We saw that she was strengthened in the Lord. And we saw that she spoke words of praise. And she delighted in her deliverance. That God had brought her through something. And she was excited about that and delighted in it. And then we look at verse 2. And here she laid the foundation for who God was. Right up front, she said who God was. And that's what she put her focus on. And she not only said who God was, but she also said who he was to us. So like, this is not just something we know about this person, but here is what we know about this person and what they mean to us. So today we're going to look at verse 3. And verse 3 reads, do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds away. So remember in verse 2, she acknowledged who he was. She said, there is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. So she said who he was. She said, there's no one holy like the Lord. So she put him, he's in a class all by himself. Nobody else is in that space with him. And she says, there's no one besides you. You're the only one. And then she goes on to say, there's no rock like our God, referring to him as a rock. And when we think about a rock, think about strength and we think about stability. We think about steadfastness. We think about being unmovable. And it also speaks that he doesn't change. He's a rock. He doesn't change. So she starts focusing her prayer on who God is. So the question is, when you pray, do you focus on who God is, or do we focus on what God can do for us? So when we focus on who God is, it helps us put a handle on our problems. It helps us put our problems in perspective, because when we think about who God is, this big God, we recognize that these problems, they're not that big of a deal. They're a big deal in our lives, but the God we serve is not a big deal. So Hannah acknowledges that God is God all by himself. She says holy, he's separate, he's set apart. She put nobody else in it with him. So she puts God in perspective. And she puts everything else in perspective relative to God. She acknowledges that he's God all by himself. There's nobody else. She doesn't compare him to anyone else. And she said there's no one like him. And he's not like anyone. She said God is holy. And like I said, she refers to him as a rock. She talks about that stability. So it's in those characteristics, who God is, that he's God all by himself, that he's in a class all by himself, that he stands alone and nobody else even compares to him, and that he's our rock, he's our strength, he's our stability, he's steadfast, he's unmovable, and he does not change. So when we can hold on to those characteristics, then we realize that we can depend on him. And we can depend on him just as she did. And remember, her dependence was on him so great that she was willing to, listen, God, you've given me this baby, but I'm going to give him back to you. And I'm going to trust you. I know I'm leaving him with Eli, but I trust you. And when we believe that God promises will never fail, when we believe that, then we can do as she did. She left her baby with Eli, but she wasn't leaving her baby with Eli. She was leaving her baby with the Lord. Eli just happened to be there. Malachi chapter 3, verse 6. First part of that says, I, the Lord, do not change. God is God. Who he was then is who he is now, and is who he will be. He's the same God. He doesn't change. And when we can acknowledge that, understand that, because it's one thing to say, yeah, that is, but understand what that really means. It's not just, yes, he's God in a class all by himself. It's not just, yes, he doesn't change, he's a rock. But it's understanding what that means. And then when we believe on that statement, like, okay, I acknowledge that, I understand that that means he's unchangeable. And then when I believe that, then for Hannah, it took her to the next part of the prayer, that God is a God of knowledge. So, it says, do not keep talking, verse 3, do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. So she's given a warning. She's acknowledged who God was, and now she's given a warning based on who he is. She said, don't keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. I think when she's saying this, she's probably thinking of Peninnah. You know, Penina, she had done and said some really mean and harsh things. But I think she probably had her in mind, but not just her. Because this is a warning for all of us. She said, listen, don't keep talking so proudly. Don't be walking around here like you had something to do with things. She said, don't let your mouth speak such arrogance. So don't be boasting about it. And I think about Penina. She's probably saying, you walking around here like you're the one who caused you to be pregnant. It was God. And it's a warning to all of us when we walk around being puffed up, boasting about who we are, not who God is in us, but who we are when we walk around believing that it's us. That's a problem, and that's the warning to us. So when I think about Penina, just think about her for a moment. You know, she was boasting and taunting. She just taunted Hannah. I'm imagining all the time. But when they went up to Shiloh, I'm imagining the intensity increased because they were all there in that one spot. She did and said some awful things. Because remember, she had children and Hannah didn't. And it's as in those statements, those mean things, the taunting of Hannah, there's some pride and some boasting. And look at me, look at who I am, look at what I've done. And the reality is it isn't about her. So what Hannah was saying, she said, be careful of what you say. Because God is always listening. She said, and He knows if it's right or wrong. Because not all, when we're talking about and finding a sense of satisfaction in what we do, that's not always the bad thing. It's when we believe that was about us and not about God. Because she goes on to say that God, He weighs. He is the one that He judges all that. So He's the one who weighs our deeds. He knows what we've done. He knows what the intent was when we did it. And He's the one who weighs it. And the reality is, there is no denying what we've said, or when we said it, or what we did, or what we even meant by it. We often will say things or do things, and then somebody walk away with something that we didn't intend for them to walk away, and we say things like, well, that's not what I really meant. And sometimes it is what we really meant. But when we see the response and the reaction, then we try and bring it back a little bit. But saying, that's not what I really meant. But you see, God is all-knowing. God has all knowledge. God is everywhere, all the time. So He knows the intent of our hearts when we say and do things. And we can't deny it. So He weighs, and He weighs justly. Because it's not like somebody who's standing on the outside and trying to judge what we've done. And then well, that's not really what I meant. Let me tell you what I meant. Let me tell you why I said what I said. And now they have to readjust things because we've perhaps given them some information that they didn't have before. So now they're readjusting the way they're thinking. But that's not the case with God. God is right there when we said it. He knows what we're saying. He knows what we're doing. And He knows the intent of our heart. So God weighs it, but He weighs justly because He has all the information, and He weighs justly. So The questions are, in what ways have you relied on your own strength? Now the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean to you to think God is the God of knowledge? Do we ever really think that? We know that, some concept out there, but do we really think that, like put those pieces together, that God is the God of knowledge, that he's right here, right now. He knows what I'm thinking. He knows what I'm doing. He knows why I'm doing it. And I have to be accountable for that. So, here's some things to remember. It is not wrong to feel good about your accomplishments as long as you are mindful that you are able to do what you do only through the strength of Christ. And it is not just about what you say or do. It is also about the intent of your heart. Remember, God is always right there, and he weighs justly. So, thank you for listening, and we will get together via Zoom. I will send you a link to get on, and we will meet at 6:30 instead of 6 o'clock, since there's no meal. And I'm imagining it'll only be about 30 minutes or so, because we won't go through this lesson. You will have reviewed this. We'll only go through the questions. So I want you to be thinking about the questions. There are 3 questions on the table. Does it matter what God knows? And in what ways have you relied on your own strength? And what does it mean to you to think that God is the God of knowledge? Thank you, ladies.